we all got this taste of taking the control of hard work and seeing the results. So I became hell-bent on trying to get into Oxford, didn't get in with the interview, and that was the first knock that I had, but ended up going to Durham as that was the next best university. Not the university I wanted to go to. I hadn't even looked. I hadn't even been to it, but it was the next best. So I thought that's the right option. Why would anyone not go to the best university they could do, Fergus?
Yep.
So I think my turnaround from a useless kid to a kid that got a taste for self-driven improvement made me hell-bent on fulfilling this roadmap that I'd set for myself. And I was led down the path of believing that the way to do that was to go to the best university you could, to get the best job that you could, which meant that you could then develop through the rat race the best that you could. And that roadmap ultimately meant that the first hurdle I was dealt, which was a less than ideal situation circumstantially at university, I then started to hit the slippery slope of self-destruction, really, where all I had to do was be honest about the way that I was feeling and how I was, the situation that I was in from a few weeks in.
Yep.
And it could have been very different, but because I was a bloke, because I was the successful one, because I was the hardworking one, because I was the one that was up every day doing all these things and had all these ambitions, if I admitted that, I'd be weak, I'd be less strong, I'd be letting down my own expectations, letting down other people's expectations of me. And that would make me a laughing stock, that would make me a freak, that would make me a failure. So I just kind of kept rolling with the punches for a while, putting a smile on whenever I saw people, had training, which for me was the only constant that I could rely on. Bought a Texas deadlift bar, which I stored in the stories they had there and everything. Like it was just a huge part of my life. Training for powerlifting still, and then exams rolled around for second year and everybody's timetable changed. I wasn't seeing my friends very often. They were on doing this weird thing where you start work at 11 p.m., nail loads of caffeine and finish at 6 a.m. for no real reason other than it's what people seem to do. Whereas I wasn't doing that. But then I realized that a week had gone by, Sunday to Sunday, where I hadn't actually said a word out loud to another human being other than a cashier, a barista, a train conductor, the sort of service staff, I guess, that were around me that were offering a transaction rather than a human interaction. That was the difference. And I realized a week had gone by. And then not long after that, my previous perception of depression, mental health in general, was that it was a made up thing, an excuse that people that wanted to avoid responsibility or to get out of pushing themselves had in the cookie jar to talk about if they needed to. And then I started to struggle to eat, struggle to sleep. I was getting split in half by warm-up weights at the gym that I should be able to do with my eyes closed for sets of 25. And it then became overwhelmingly real. And that made me even more fearful of exposing myself as a failure, of exposing how I felt, because I was actually being physically affected by my own head, which to me at that point was a ridiculous thing to think, because it just was so nonsensical as this bloke that was very ambitious, very self-driven, etc., etc. And the rest of the memory is a little bit blurry around it, but ultimately that got worse and worse. I continued to not do anything about it. And then early May of 2016, swallowed as many pills as I could get my hands on, drank what was, I think, about a litre of spirit, and hoped to find peace. And I say find peace rather than to die, because I think I consciously avoided the reality of what my intentions were, because all I wanted was a break from my own mind. And I knew what that entailed, but if I accepted what that entailed, then I'd be confronting what I would be leaving behind. And that might be an incentive for me not to do it, if that makes sense.
Yeah.
I wanted peace. I didn't want to die. That's the difference. And I came around in a puddle of my own vomit, however many hours later, barely conscious, to the point where I was cognitively conscious, but physically I still wasn't there, because I was still highly, highly intoxicated and under the influence of all these things I'd ingested. And my first feeling was one of like fury, because the only thing I'd done to take initiative in the situation and try and get me out of the situation that I'd been in had failed. I was fallen short. So I felt even more useless than I had done previously, but started to become a bit more cognitive again. And the next 2 days, I can't really remember, but I know that not long afterwards, I got a message from one of my friends, Andy, who's in Edinburgh, sent me a message saying, I'm getting a puppy from this litter next week, you in? And he was joking. I was on a student loan income. Like, I didn't have a property of my own, etc. He was just taking the piss, just kind of flexing on me that he was getting a puppy. And in the back of my mind, I thought, yes, that's absolutely what I need. And the obvious things are, it gave me structure, routine, responsibility, a sense of purpose, etc. But that all came afterwards. I think the first thing that I thought in the back of my mind was, that's a heartbeat. and I need that. So a week later, I'd cleared out my student loan, and I had a 14-week-old French bulldog, for the reason being that I was just craving some sort of companionship, some sort of heartbeat in the room with me to make me feel like I wasn't so isolated and alone. And slowly but surely, in the Northeast, you know what people are like. They're very friendly. Dog people talk to people. And I was just walking Odie, and people would just talk about him, just say, oh, how's he getting on? Is he toilet trained? Where are you walking him? All this stuff. And that allowed me to start having conversations with people again and feel much less alone. And it wasn't like I was saying, oh, I've attempted suicide, I've felt depressed, to these strangers. They were just asking how the dog was getting on. And what that did was it allowed me to get back a sense of self and actually talk to people again and feel like I was coming out of this hole. And repeatedly, that was a huge, huge shift. And then I was walking Odie one day off the lead in Jesmond Dean, which is just a lovely little green area in Jesmond in the Northeast.
Very well.
Yeah, it's lovely.
Yeah,
And I had him off the lead, and
cool.
because he was too scared to be far away from me. So we were just chilling, just walking in the sun. And I just said things out loud, like, we're going to be okay, aren't we, pig? And when I said them, I kind of like almost, it was like I was reaching out to kind of like put them back in and like hide them again and suppress them, because I didn't want to acknowledge that I hadn't been okay. And saying these things out loud to Odie, who was now my best mate, was the first time that I'd actually internalized and vocalized them to the point where I could actually then start to process the information and do something about it, rather than just do my best to repress it.